Hello, class, and welcome to This Week in Interviewing Techniques. My name is Dr. Neil Soggie, and I'm your instructor for this course. So today, as we draw closer to the end of this course, we're going to be focusing on one of the most important and enduring elements of addiction counseling, the whole idea of supporting the recovery process. Now, the thing to remember here is that recovery is not a single event. It is a journey, and there are going to be setbacks. Clients will face milestones, and we can celebrate those. They will face plateaus, and we can walk with them through those times. And there will be setbacks, but we shouldn't be discouraged by that. That is all part of the journey. Our role is to walk with them, to support their growth, and remain consistent even when change is slow or uneven. And so this lecture explores how we can use interviewing skills to foster hope and resilience and sustain recovery, all of which is absolutely important in the process. Now, as always, I like to start off with a little story about someone and then dive into the themes for the week. And this week, our theme to start us off will be, as I mentioned, understanding the recovery process, not as a destination, but as a process, a journey. It is a process, it's not a single point. I also want to integrate into that some interviewing skills that reinforce the long-term support in that process. And finally, help the client to navigate any setbacks or relapses and help them to find some recommitment language, to have recommitment conversations with the client. All of which is very important in the addictions field. So let's dive into today's lecture, and I want to introduce you to a fellow by the name of William Wright, born in 1947. Really a leading figure in recovery advocacy. He wrote a fairly popular book called Slaying the Dragon, that traces the history of addiction treatment in the United States. And White is known for promoting recovery-oriented systems of care and valuing the lived experience of the client. And that is just so wonderful when someone does that, because it really does reinforce that the person is a person. They're not an addict, and that's all that they are. This slave to some substance, but they are a person who is struggling, and they have a lived world that is valuable and important. And so he emphasizes the role of peers within this lived world, the role of community, and of long-term support, because recovery is a long-term process, and he emphasizes that over short-term treatment. You can't go into a treatment center for 8, 12 weeks and expect that life will be perfect afterwards. It's just, that's not how addictions works. And his work has helped to redefine addiction recovery as a chronic process with individualized, client-driven paths. And we need to honor those in this process of recovery, remembering that it is a process, not a fixed point. So, when we talk about recovery as process, that kind of gives us a little bit of a hint of what we mean by how we look at recovery. Recovery is not linear. Clients may experience some early successes and then nothing. No progress is made for a long period of time. There's a long plateau. And maybe there's some multiple relapses in there. Each person's timeline is going to be different. And our job is to normalize the process, reduce the shame and highlight progress over perfection. Recovery includes rebuilding relationships, exploring identity, and reclaiming health, all of which is part of that process, not a single fixed point. So the thing to kind of be mindful of is that recovery capital is the language that we use to talk about what do we have in this lived world of the client that we can use. So recovery capital refers to really the internal resources of the person that they can draw from to sustain their recovery, and also the external resources that a person has access to. So this might be, supportive relationships. This might be their ability to organize. This might be housing and employment stability. This might be spiritual commitments or community involvement. This might be coping skills and self-awareness. All of this is tools that we can use and help the client to use to move forward in this recovery process. And the interviewer, the counselor's role here is to help the client identify these strengths as resources that may be used. And so as we are with the client in their lived world, sometimes it's good to ask questions about, well, what about this relationship? How can this be a support, do you think? Or, you have some obvious skills here. How might you want to use those to support your recovery and your choices? The other thing to kind of be mindful of is that this is a process, and so there's a time component to it. And so having that supportive, caring relationship is absolutely central to maintaining engagement, and helping the client to particularly find internal motivation is central to maintaining engagement over time. The client needs to care. As the client moves through the stages of recovery, the tone and focus of the sessions is going to shift, and that's inevitable. At the very early stages, you can kind of expect some focus on stabilizing the client and some safety issues. But when you get to the middle stages, you're going to be focusing more on growth and figuring out some goals and developing some structures for recovery. And when you get to the later stages, you're going to be supporting the identity building and the deeper parts of solidifying and strengthening the person and their identity as someone that is in recovery. So in the midst of all of that, it's important, of course, to stay flexible and let the client's needs shape the conversation. Remember, autonomy is important, but internal motivation and engagement is absolutely essential in this process. And there will be relapse. It's just the nature of people. Relapses are things, though, that we can learn from. They are learning experiences. Like Bob Ross says when he would paint pictures, there are no such thing as mistakes, only happy accidents. And I just love that. And you can kind of think of a relapse as a happy accident. It's something that you can learn from. It's a relapse that you can be a learning experience and not a failure. And so if it happens, explore what led up to it. Don't bring any shame. Explore what the client learned from this situation, and then reinforce their return to counseling as a strength. Hey, you're back here. That's fantastic. Clearly, you're motivated. Well done. And using language that keeps the door open. So you can say things like, let's talk about what's next. Let's not dwell on that one event. Let's look forward and see what we can do. There's no place for shame, only support. And of course, we want to, as we go through this process, we will need to identify the strengths that the client has. So use some reflection to highlight the client's resiliency, to encourage them to continue to stay engaged. Because if a client feels like it's impossible, that they don't have the resources to do this, they will give up. And as long as they're engaged, they're not giving up. And so there's hope and there's progress that can be made. So strength-based reflections are absolutely essential in maintaining the engagement of the client. So statements like, you came back, that shows real strength. Or even with setbacks, you still show commitment. Or what you learned from this will help you to grow. And I'm so proud of you for that. These are reflections that restore hope and agency. They give autonomy and recognize the strength of the client. And remember, you're wanting to support the whole person here. Having a full life where the person can engage in meaningful activities apart from the thing that might give them pleasure in the addiction is essential. People want to be happy. And if the only thing that the client knows that gives them happiness or gives them that sense of taking away their pain is the addiction, they're going to always go back to it. And so there needs to be support of the full identity of the person. So ask about hobbies and passions that they may have. Ask about parenting and caregiving roles that they are engaged in. Ask about personal goals and what kind of legacy they want to leave to the world. And these kind of things reinforce the sense that they have a future, that they have a future orientation, that they have something to look forward to and work towards. And it's a sense of wholeness and meaning. To work for something beyond themselves gives people resilience. Now, in the midst of all of this recovery, I want to just kind of throw out some scenarios. So the client might say something like, I messed up again. Maybe I'm not cut out for this whole recovery thing. And for you, what can you say there? Well, I hear you're hurting, but you're also back here facing it. And think about it. That is recovery. Recognizing that there's cycles, there's a process to it, reinforces this. And so they don't kind of need to feel that if they fail once that they're done. Or the client might say, I've never made it this far before. And you can really reinforce that and acknowledge that's a huge progress. Let's explore what's been working for you. All of these things can affirm the client's strengths and their capacity to keep going. And that is extremely valuable. So as we close out this lecture, I want to kind of highlight a few key terms. Just remember that something we always need to keep in mind is recovery capital. And when we talk about that, we're talking about the internal and external resources that support recovery. When we speak of relapse, we're talking about a return to the substance of use after a period of abstinence. Okay, so it's kind of a setback. When we talk about resilience, we're talking about the ability to recover from those setbacks and to continue with progress. So what would be a statement that reflects a recovery-oriented approach? Well, that would be something like, yeah, sure, you made a mistake and you're still in the fight. That, I think, is a good reflection of the recovery-oriented approach. You're not giving up. So, as we close out, just remember that recovery support is about simply being present. It's not about being perfect. It's about recognizing that there is a process, and so all we need to do is be present. As a counselor, we help sustain hope, we reflect strength, and we guide with humility. We celebrate wins, and we stand steady through setbacks. So this week, want you to reflect when you're talking with other people about how you are helping them through their journey. What does it mean to be a companion, not a director, in this journey? And how can you support growth while honoring the struggle that this person has? And your steadiness may become someone's turning point, and that can be a transformative event for you and for them. Hope you enjoyed this lecture. My name is Dr. Neil Soggie, and I will see you next week. You take care. Bye-bye.